Interpol has hired an astrologer named Marianne to aid in their Lupin capture. Lupin laughs her off, but Goemon's own predictions see woman trouble in their future. The gang continue on with their latest heist, the Poseidon Flame Emerald, owned by King Gabriel of Danmaru, unaware that Marianne's bird is watching over them. Zenigata watches as Marianne identifies the gang's target, already being spied on by disguised and independently working Fujiko. Gabriel likes throwing money around despite being allegedly incognito, and pays Zenigata for help keeping Lupin away. Zenigata refuses payment, being a man of the law, and tells him his team is already at the hotel. Lupin keeps watching the air ducts and makes his way to Gabriel's room. He emerges in the bath and uses knockout gas on Gabriel. Zenigata arrives just in time to see Lupin escaping. Marianne's ready and sets her bird on Lupin's balloon. Jigen comes to the rescue of the emerald. Fujiko, managing to avoid notice for now, can only watch as Lupin is arrested. The bird spies on Jigen and Goemon discussing their next move. Marianne uses it to take control of Goemon, who attacks Jigen and takes the emerald. Jigen follows after him and spots the bird overhead. Meanwhile, Marianne also predicts that Lupin will escape, so the police put moves to transfer him. Lupin also spots the bird following in the transport van. Moved to a plane, he converses with Zenigata about Marianne, and a disguised Goemon comes to Lupin's aid. Marianne follows as they escape the plane, predicting to Zenigata that Lupin will still die by Goemon's hand. She takes control of Goemon again and has him attack Lupin. Jigen rushes to help, but Lupin is backed to a cliff. Marianne's aim was to get the emerald herself, and does some diving in order to find it. As she admires it, Lupin appears, explaining he knew she wasn't really an Interpol agent. Marianne has one more ace, namely making Lupin fall in love with her. And of course, Lupin's big weakness comes and bites him. Thankfully, Jigen's to the rescue for real this time, and shoots her bird, which was augmented. Goemon also slashes her crystal ball, revealing that it was also a conduit for her powers. The gang bring Marianne to shore, but Zenigata is waiting. In the confusion, Lupin drops the emerald and it turns out to be fake. Gabriel had the real emerald the whole time. He also knows who Fujiko is, as Lupin III broadcasts in Danmaru. Oh, and Lupin isn't quite free of Marianne's spell either, much to her chagrin. It's rare, but they do sometimes acknowledge that Lupin III is a TV show. Here and when Zenigata refuses to chase Lupin because it's his day off, that episode come to mind. In terms of Marianne, it's an interesting twist on Lupin vs technology, with her using tech to pretend to be supernatural. Good ending twist too, showing that there can be drawbacks to being renowned, and also that sometimes Lupin's targets aren't as witless as he thinks. Lupin receives a phone call from Fujiko while half asleep, so he passes it to Jigen. She's at Dr. Pot's lab, a man who invents some of the gadgets Lupin uses. His latest one is a robot that produces diamonds, having already produced enough to make a dress. Lupin doesn't really care right now, but a gangster named Gavot certainly does. Gavot opens fire and takes the robot for himself. Unfortunately, for some reason it only produces water, leaving Gavot's girlfriend Baby unimpressed. Gavot takes his anger out on his henchman One-Eared Joe, but Baby has a fondness for him. Meanwhile, the gang make their way to Gavot's bar, with Fujiko reinforcing that the diamonds were the real deal by saying Gavot's gunfire was deflected by her dress. Is that how diamonds work? They end up crashing thanks to Gavot's passing car right in sight of Zenigata. Thankfully, Lupin's car isn't too badly damaged for once, and he gets away pretty quickly. Zenigata then hails a taxi to follow Lupin, which the driver takes a bit too literally. The gang steal the robot back and pass by Zenigata again, who hails the same taxi but this time actually gets a lift. The gang also pass by Gavot, who's returning from Pot's place having kidnapped him. Of course, with the robot gone, Baby's not impressed. Gavat tries to get the info out of Pot on who'd steal it, but has trouble until Pot trips into Baby. The gang, now at Pot's lab, play around with his gadgets, only to be interrupted by gunfire from Gavat's men. The men move in, but the gang have disappeared and Baby throws stuff at Gavat in frustration. Everyone leaves and the gang are revealed to be hiding on a light fixture. The pieces Baby threw turn out to be the robot, which Lupin took apart to hide. He's got experience building model ships, so logic dictates that he can put the robot back together. Jigen finds Baby in the bathroom, who tells them the robot can only produce water. Lupin tells her that if Gavat turns Pot over, he'll give them the robot, so they meet at an amusement park the next day. Neither trusts the other, so Gavat sends Pot across using a roller coaster. Turns out to be a trap, as Pot's coaster crashes into Lupin's, allowing Gavat to get both. At least until Goemon severs the track and Jigen lifts it vertically, using momentum to send them back in Lupin's direction. Gavat's men don't prove much use either. As the coaster arrives back at an arguing Gavat and Baby, everyone suggests they get married, with Fujiko even providing a cake. Which then explodes. It happens. As the gang leaves, Zenigata makes another appearance. The track's still severed and they leave him on the ground using Jigen's helicopter. The robot was producing water due to a lack of the coagulant liquid. The diamonds this time turn out to be ice cubes though, which as it turns out was the intended purpose all along. An epilogue shows that Gavat is out of the gangster business, the robot now has a job at Gavat's old bar, and Baby hooked up with One-Eared Joe, with her showing the same love she did for Gavat. While I'm not too familiar with it as a series, this episode's opening and ending are a reference to the FBI. That said, I am at least familiar with its star Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. thanks to his voice work. This episode leans more into a screwball slapstick comedy style, with Baby and Gavat feeling pretty much lifted from one of those cartoons in how their relationship is portrayed. There's also apparently a third variant on Zenigata's encounters with the taxi driver, where the driver flies out as Superman to chase the gang's helicopter, but it wasn't in the version I watched. Lastly, worth noting is that this episode was written by the same writer as episode 68, Yoshio Urasawa. I think he's a fan of New York. Fujiko's all dressed up as she's been invited to a concert conducted by the great Kyoransky. The others only become interested when they learn he uses a diamond baton. Lupin and Jigen admire the baton but decide to sleep out the concert. As Kyoransky conducts with overdramatic flair, Fujiko and Goemon seem to fall under a trance. Not just them, as Zenigata is also in the audience and Kyoransky somehow controls him into ordering an attack on Lupin. As the performance ends, everyone seems to return to normal, not even noticing the bullet holes. Fujiko doesn't seem to remember what happened at the concert. She gets Lupin to put on Kyoransky's performance of Night on Bald Mountain for some downtime. This sends her into a murderous rage against Lupin until their fight damages the record. While mulling it over, Goemon also falls under a TV broadcast of Kyoransky's performance. Thankfully, Lupin and Jigen manage to turn it off Chief Wiggum style. Lupin decides to check out Kyoransky's home for clues, but he's expected. When questioned, Kyoransky explains he just doesn't want his baton stolen despite the insurance policy. He points Lupin to another exit, but then starts playing music and subjecting Lupin to a chandelier attack. Meanwhile, Zenigata also gets the go-ahead to increase security for Kyoransky. At an outdoor performance, Zenigata arrives and outs Lupin and Jigen as part of the crew. A rampage of bulls interrupts them, but Lupin got the recording he needed. Back at the hideout, Lupin looks over the footage and picks up a dog whistle as Kyoransky swings his baton. He cross-references using one of his records and finds the same noise. Unfortunately, Jigen ends up falling under its power, but Lupin accounted for it. Goemon, chained up alongside Fujiko for safety, also breaks free, but Lupin took Santetsuken's blade beforehand. Same for Fujiko and her gun, among other things. With that sorted out, Lupin decides to make use of a ladle to create a similar effect. The gang meet Coercing for a final confrontation. Coercing reveals that his father was a jeweller who was killed by Lupin in a heist, but Lupin doesn't remember him, noting that he was probably a criminal himself. Coercing laughs off Lupin's ladle counterattack, but it proves more successful than he anticipated. Zenigata falls under its sway and he fires on Coercing. Can't beat some good classical music. Certainly an interesting idea too, using deadly conducting to take on Lupin. Funny that Night on Bald Mountain gets the most play here, considering that one of its most famous performances was conducted by a man who didn't use a baton. Kind of a brutal way to finish Coercing off though. Worth noting is that this was also the last episode to be dubbed in English by Genion as their licence ran out. 2 others got dubbed under the name Tales of the Wolf, but they were done with a different cast. An old man named Silver is released from prison after serving an 8-year sentence. He's immediately confronted by Lupin, who in turn is interrupted by Zenigata thanks to Silver's anticipation. Lupin escapes, but so does Silver. 8 years prior, Silver and Lupin worked together on a train heist. It went well until Silver almost literally sold Lupin up the river. He then got himself arrested for an unrelated bank robbery to avoid Lupin's wrath. Lupin and Jigen keep tabs on Silver, but he knows they're watching, so they just bring him to their hideout for some friendly interrogation. Silver lets slip that he's working with Fujiko just as a gas grenade comes through the window. Thankfully, Goemon is keeping watch and fires a tracker at their car. The gang follows Silver and Fujiko to a rocky area. After the gang confronts him, Silver points to a building as the site he hid the money. In the interim, a high security prison has been built, so Lupin's plan is to turn himself in. Zenigata heads to the prison to confirm everything. The prison's warden tells him Lupin is being held in a tower cell, and is set to be executed in a week. Lupin keeps busy by looking over the prison yard while consulting a floor plan he smuggled in. With 1 day left, Zenigata is told of the execution method, namely microwaving Lupin. The day of the execution arrives, and despite his apprehension at Lupin's incoming death, Zenigata asks if he wants anything. Lupin answers, cup ramen, which Zenigata finds stupid. They honour it anyway with a phone number to a conveniently open restaurant that sells it. No prizes for guessing who was on the other end of the phone. Zenigata does a test to make sure there's no tricks, and it's delivered to Lupin. The execution is then carried out, with Zenigata deciding to activate it himself. He's depressed, but then it's discovered to be a balloon decoy. Lupin hid in the toilet compartment and makes his escape with Jigen's help and using the ramen as a rope. Tough stuff, I guess. As the police search for Lupin, Zenigata leans against a tree and discovers it was sliced. The tree was where Silver hid the money, and Lupin makes his escape with it. Silver's not able to keep hold of him though, so Jigen shoots him loose. Problem is, he's headed back to the prison, so he's forced to ditch his glider. Silver, on the other hand, is happy to go back there if it means he can get his money. Decent enough episode here, if not the best animated due to background characters often being static. Sort of a twist on episode 4 of series 1 in a sense, except the site of the money was already built on. Also keeps Zenigata consistent with that episode, with him expecting and sort of wanting Lupin to escape, and being pleased when he does so. Plus it's nice to see an acknowledgement that Lupin has worked with other characters besides the main gang in the past. Next time, a Great Bell robbery, a tangle with Napoleon's descendants, a Wild Western backdrop, and an encounter with a mentor of Jigen brings us to episode 84. Until then.